All glories to Srila Prabhupada. So, welcome to today's Srimad Bhagavatam program. Thank you for joining us today again, like every Sunday. Our speaker for today's class is Braja Devi Mataji. Well, Braja Devi Mataji is someone who's inspired many devotees in our Leicester congregation and also from outside. She came to Krishna consciousness 5 years back or so, when she met devotees at the Hare Krishna festival in Lapra. She then instantly took to Krishna consciousness and started coming to the ISKCON Leicester temple. Mataji lives a very, very simple life. She likes reading Prabhupada's books and listens to lots of Krishna Katha. She also loves knitting beautiful outfits for her own Gauranitai deities. Not just that, she loves cooking sweets at home and has learned to make delicious Indian sweets. In the past, she's made sweets for many programs. I mean, this was when the temple was open. Mataji is from Italy. She loves doing devotional service and has been engaged in many services at the Leicester temple, like even cleaning, admin work, Sankirtan, or inviting people to the temple. She's contributed a lot and is still eager for more and more. She has done book distribution services as well. Many devotees have been inspired by Mataji's book distribution service. Some people call her as the Krishna book lady at the city center here in Leicester. Mataji was engaged in the backup service for Sri Radha Madhav. She's an initiated disciple of His Holiness Radhanath Swami Maharaj. I think you got initiated in 2019, if I'm not wrong. Mataji is involved in a new project of convincing hotels and B&Bs to take Bhagavad Gitas for the rooms for the guests. I wish you all the best, Mataji, for this project and many other services for the temple. If possible, do let us know about this project as to if you're still doing it or not. I look forward to your class again. Haribol, Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, can you hear me?
Yes, Mataji, loud and clear.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Prabhu, for your presentation. And just so I will start with Jai Radha Madhava, and then we can move on to the verses. Just to answer to your question about the Bhagavad Gita's, the hotel distribution. We were doing like last year during the the December marathon, when we got like a Bhagavad Gita sponsored, and we carried on like for a few months after that as well, like to distribute all the Bhagavad Gita sponsored. And at the moment, as far as I know, that there is nothing. Maybe I don't know if there will be something planned for the future. But yeah, it was a very very nice service, very blissful service. So yeah, let's have. So I'll start with Jai Radha Madhava.
Thank you.
Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari, Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari, Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana, Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana, Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava, Radha Madhava, Radha Madhava Sri Radha. Jaya Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivajakacara Stottara Shakta Sri Srimad A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jaya Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivajakacara Stottara Shakta Sri Srimad Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Gauti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Prem Se Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shyamu Kund Radha Kund Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Madhava Ki Jai. Shri Krishna Chandra Ki Jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Shri Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai. Ganga Mai Ki Jai. Yamuna Mai Ki Jai. Tulsi Devi Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai. Brihat Mridanga Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Gaura Premananda. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay, so today we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam. It's the first canto and it's chapter 9. And the verses are 14, 15, and 16. So, okay, thank you, Prabhu. Sarvam kala kritam manye bhagavatam cha yad apriyam sapalo yad vasheloko vayo iva ganavalihi. Word for word translation. Sarvam, all these, kala kritam, done by the inevitable time, manye, I think, bhavatam, bhavatam cha, for you also, yat, whatever, apriyam, detestable, sapalaha, with the rulers, yat vashe, under the control of that time, lokaha, everyone in every planet, vayoho, like air carrying, eva, as, kana avalihi, the bunches of clouds. Translation. In my opinion, this is all due to inevitable time, under whose control everyone in every planet is carried, just as the clouds are carried by the wind. Purport by Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. There is control of time all over the space within the universe, as there is control of time all over the planets. All the big gigantic planets, including the sun, are being controlled by the force of air, as the clouds are carried by the force of air. Similarly, the inevitable Kala or time controls even the actions of the air and other elements. Everything is therefore controlled by the Supreme Kala, a forceful representative of the Lord within the material world. Thus, Yudhishthira should not be sorry for the inconceivable action of time. Everyone has to bear the actions and reactions of time as long as one is within the conditions of the material world. Yudhishthira should not think that he had committed sins in this previous birth and is suffering the consequence. Even the most pious has to suffer the condition of material nature. But a pious man is faithful to the Lord, who is guided by the bona fide Brahmana and Vaishnava following the religious principles. These three guiding principles should be the aim of life. One should not be disturbed by the tricks of eternal time. Even the great controller of the universe, Brahmaji, is also under the control of time. No one should therefore grudge being thus controlled by time, despite being a true follower of religious principles. Text 15. Yatra dharma suto raja gadapanir vrikodaraha Krishnos trigandivam chapam surit Krishnas tato pipat. Word for word translation. Yatra, where there is, Dharma Sutaha, the son of Dharmaraj, Raja, the king, Gadapanihi, hands with his mighty club, Vrikodaraha, Bhima, Krishnaha, Arjun, Astri, carrier of the weapon, Gandiva, Chapam, arrows, Surit, well-wisher, Krishnaha, Lord Krishna, the personality of Godhead, Tattaha, thereof, Vipat, reverse. Translation. Oh, how wonderful is the influence of inevitable time. It is irreversible. Otherwise, how can there be reverses in the presence of King Yudhishthira, the son of the demigod controlling religion, Bhima, the great fighter with a club, the great bowman Arjun with his mighty weapon Gandiva, and above all, the Lord, the direct well-wisher of the Pandavas. Purport. As far as material or spiritual resources were required, there was no scarcity in the case of the Pandavas. Materially, they were well equipped because two great warriors, namely Bhima and Arjun, were there. Spiritually, the king himself was the symbol of religion, and above all of them, the personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna, was personally concerned with their affairs as the well-wisher. And yet there were so many reverses on the side of the Pandavas. Despite the power of pious acts, the power of personalities, the power of expert management, and the power of weapons, under the direct supervision of Lord Krishna, the Pandavas suffered so many practical reverses, which can only be explained as due to the influence of Kala, the inevitable time. Kala is identical with the Lord himself, and therefore the influence of Kala indicates the inexplicable wish of the Lord himself. There is nothing to be lamented when a matter is beyond the control of any human being. Text 16. Nahyasya karhichid rajam puman veda viditstitam yat vichigyasaya yukta muyanti kavayopihi. Word for word translation. Na, never. He certainly. Asya, his. Karhichit, whatsoever. Rajan, O king. Puman, anyone. Veda knows Viditstitam plan, yet which Vijigyasaya, even after exhaustive inquiries, Yuktaha, being engaged in, Muyanti, bewildered, Kavayaha, great philosophers, Api, even he, certainly. Translation. O king, no one can know the plan of the Lord, Sri Krishna. Even though great philosophers inquire exhaustively, they are bewildered. Purport. The bewilderment of Maharaj Yudhishthira over his past sinful acts and the resultant suffering, etc., is completely negated by the great authority Bhishma, one of the 12 authorized persons. Bhishma wanted to impress upon Maharaj Yudhishthira that since time immemorial, no one, including such demigods as Shiva and Brahma, could ascertain the real plan of the Lord. So what can we understand about it? It is useless also to inquire about it. Even the exhaustive philosophical inquiries of sages cannot ascertain the plan of the Lord. The best policy is simply to abide by the orders of the Lord without argument. The sufferings of the Pandavas were never due to their past deeds. The Lord had to execute the plan of establishing the kingdom of virtue, and therefore his own devotees suffered temporarily in order to establish the conquest of virtue. Bhishmadev was certainly satisfied by seeing the triumph of virtue, and he was glad to see King Yudhishthira on the throne, although he himself fought against him. Even a great fighter like Bhishma could not win the battle of Kurukshetra because the Lord wanted to show that vice cannot conquer virtue, regardless of who tries to execute it. Bhishmadev was a great devotee of the Lord, but he chose to fight against the Pandavas by the will of the Lord, because the Lord wanted to show that a fighter like Bhishma cannot win on the wrong side. ॐ ज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपा कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वापदान्तिकम् वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरुं श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरुं वैष्णवंश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सागनारघुनाथं वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपदं सहगना ललिता श्रीविशाखाविदंश्च हे कृष्ण करुणा सिन्धु दीनबन्धो जगत्पते गोपेशा गोपिका कान्ता राधा कान्ता नमोस्तुते तप्त कंचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये पंचकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasati Gaura Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, devotees. So first of all, I'd like to express my gratitude for this service. That although I am certainly unqualified to speak on Srimad Bhagavatam, I've been given this opportunity for my purification. So I'm very grateful for that. And I ask for the blessings of all of you senior devotees to bless me that I can say something that is inspiring for you and somehow useful for your spiritual journey. So I like to start with glorification of Srimad Bhagavatam. So what I did, we're going to go through these verses, and I was thinking that, like, because the purports are they kind of having a flow of like concepts that is very nicely presented. So what I'm going to do is that, like, going through the purports point by point in the order that Srila Prabhupada is given. So we have like we can follow through the verses very easily, like but first of all, I'd like to start with the glorification of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And I found a very nice verse in the 12th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And yeah, it says, when people properly glorify the Supreme Personality of Godhead or simply hear about His power, the Lord personally enters their hearts and cleanses away every trace of misfortune, just as the sun removes the darkness or as a powerful wind drives away the clouds. So I chose this verse to kind of set in the mood to trying to connect with the Srimad Bhagavatam and with the glorification of Krishna. For two reasons. One is because, like, there is the same analogy that we see here in these verses, the same analogy of this wind carrying away the clouds that we've seen in the verse 14. But at the same time, like, it's like expanding in different concepts of this idea of, like, the Lord being all powerful and we being helpless in our efforts to control nature. So in this verse, we've just seen in the first canto we just read, he's explaining this energy of the Lord as Kala, as the all-controlling power of time of the Lord, and that Srila Prabhupada is explaining in the verse how is it like this force controlling all the elements and controlling everything in the universe. And on the other side, in this verse, in the 12th canto, the same analogy is used, but to explain how the Lord personally removes our impurities in our heart and all kind of inauspiciousness that we may have. So, like, in the same way, we can see that, like, this idea of that the Lord is all powerful, that with our own effort we cannot actually do anything. And the second reason why I chose this verse is because we are going to talk about how these miseries inevitably come, like they came for the Pandavas, that they were put in so many challenging situations. And it's interesting that here in this verse, we are reminded that, like, just by hearing and glorifying the Lord, all kind of inauspiciousness is dissipated. So it was a very nice verse to start with. And so it's a very interesting, like inspiring idea, this idea that we are actually helpless and the God is all powerful and he's doing everything. And there is, I don't know if you remember, there was a nice painting we had in the temple and about how we're helpless. And there was like these two men that they were actually controlled by strings. If you don't remember, actually, I have it here. That's a nice picture here. I'm sure you remember from the temple that we had the big painting there. And because I think like in that painting, like we get the whole philosophy of the how we are controlled by material nature through the three modes. So that we can actually see how we are just puppets moved by material nature. And above them there is Krishna, so that we think that we are doing something that we think that we are in control, but actually it's just the desires of our mind that is moving us. It's just the three modes that they are acting through us. And there is also Krishna is saying Bhagavad Gita, Prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvashaha ahankar vimudatma kartaham niti manyate. It says that the spirit soul is bewildered by the influence of false ego, and he thinks himself is the doer of activities, but actually his activities are carried out by the three modes of material nature. So in that way we can see that we are not actually in control, but there are the three modes that are kind of controlling us. So here, like Prabhupada is saying in the purport, that Yudhishthira should not be sorry for the war, because basically like he was feeling very responsible for all the people that died in the war after the war was finished. But here Prabhupada saying that it should not be sorry for that, because that was his duty to fight in the war. And like Radhanath Swami Maharaj many times giving the example in his lectures of, it's like a bank employee that is giving a loan to a customer. So like he's giving the money, but it's not his money. So basically it's the same like when we kind of take credit for what we've done. It actually is the Lord doing things through us. So in the same way, it's like if the bank employee like takes credit for the money is given to the customer, it doesn't make any sense, because it's not his money, but it's the bank's money. And it's the same similarly, like if we take credit for what we do, we are actually not in knowledge, because we are taking credit for something that is not us doing it, but it's just the Lord doing through us. And in the same time, like in the same way, like if we blame ourselves, it's like if we blame ourselves for just doing our duties, it's not our fault. It's just we are carrying out our duty. That's not for us to blame. So we can see, like coming back to the painting, we can see that like as the example of Yudhishthira here and the example of like everyday life that we have, we think we are in control, and but we are not actually in control. So either we are controlled by the modes or we are controlled by Krishna himself. Still, like, we can see that we are not the doers. And for me, like, I found that these principles of not being the doer, like, sometimes we get into illusion that we are doing something, but that the most times that I realize that I'm actually not in control is during the books distribution service. And that's like most of the times it doesn't go as expected. Like a few days ago, I was like talking to, I don't know if they were like a couple or but it was a man and a woman. And I was talking about Bhagavad Gita. I was presenting Bhagavad Gita, and then there was this guy that, like, he was very interested. He was saying, "Oh yes, yes, I know a friend that is very, into this, and he's very intelligent. So I guess this book is for intelligent people." And I was like, wow, he's interested. So then we start talking about Bhagavad Gita, and he was like glorifying Bhagavad Gita, like the philosophy, and how this his friend, they found it like so inspiring. And that the lady was just silent. I didn't know, like, if she was like just listening or not even interested. And then at the end I was like, oh, okay, so then this is for you, please take it. And suddenly, like, the guy was like, no, I don't want it. I was like, it was so strange because it was just like so determined. He said with such determination that it was like, okay, the conversation is over, that's it. And but then the lady that was silent all this time, she said, how much is it? I was like, oh, okay. So it's like sometimes we had an idea of how things should go, but actually, like, Krishna has his own plan. So I was thinking how, like, I don't know how this service works. And like, this guy just he actually distributed the Bhagavad Gita to this lady because he actually did all the presentation, and and she actually took the book. So it was like it's kind of strange, but that's like really makes me realize how, like, we are not in control of anything. Like, Krishna has his own way, has his own plan um, to to do things. So moving on to the purpose. So Prabhupada is saying in this purport that even the pious people have to suffer conditions of material nature, and even Brahma, it says. So we can see, like, in life we have practical experience of how like the miseries of this world are unavoidable. Even if we find some temporary solutions to them, it actually doesn't solve the root of the problem, which is the material body. So Prabhupada in his books many times talks about the four miseries of the material world, like birth, disease, old age, and death. And we can see that no one is able to solve them by material standards. So no one can, check birth or, like, solve all disease. Like, they can maybe, like, they can find some, medicines or vaccines or whatever, but still they don't solve the root of the problem, because we can see that, like, they found the remedy for maybe a disease, but then they get another one in few years, another disease comes up, and then it's just it's not possible to solve the root of the problem, because the root of the problem is the material body. And old age, we are seeing, like, how so many people trying to avoid old age or to hide old age, or like with, I don't know, plastic surgery or something, you know, to appear younger, but still like they're still getting old, and there is no possibility to, you know, avoid that. And death, it's even more obvious that no one can avoid that. It's something that naturally comes. So what is wonderful that here Prabhupada is kind of like presenting this problem or challenging situation, then it's kind of giving a solution as well. And it's mentioning here in the purport how these 3 guiding principles, and we should make them the aim of life. And so these 3 guiding principles mentioned here is that, like, to follow the Brahmanas and Vaishnavas, to have faith in God, and to follow religious principles. And it's interesting because it's mentioned, these 3 guiding principles are mentioned in the previous verse as well, in the text 12. So by, you know, repeating the same point in this verse as well, is kind of making an emphasis on these points that they're really like important for us. And by making this the aim of life, we can actually be undisturbed by all these kind of challenging situations that inevitably come in life. And it's interesting because most people actually see this the other way around. So basically, first they're trying to fix their material situation, and then, you know, like they think, okay, when I am, you know, I have a better situation, maybe, you know, like I have a better job, or I have a better health condition, you know, then I will be like more peaceful. And then when I be more peaceful, then I can take on to the spiritual life, because I will have maybe like a more stable mind. But actually here Prabhupada is saying the opposite. So first we follow Brahmanas and Vaishnavas, we have faith in God, we follow religious principles, and then by this practice we will be undisturbed through challenging situations. And so it's interesting because, like, I remember a few days ago, I met a lady on book distribution, and she was saying, like, she was kind of making a list of all her, you know, diseases and all. And she was saying how it is even challenging for her, like basic, like bodily maintenance was kind of challenging, and she was going all through this, like, and because I'm not, maybe I'm not very sensitive to other people's problems, maybe. But what I said is like, okay, so if it wasn't this, then it would be something else. You know, you never find a perfect situation in life. So you know, even if you don't have all these like diseases, then you may have something else that will disturb you. So if you wait for the perfect condition for starting spiritual life, then you're going to wait all your life, because you never find a good, perfect moment. You have to make your own perfect moment. So yeah, moving on to the next verse. The next verse is also like, I feel like it's kind of structured in the same way that Prabhupada is presenting this kind of challenging situation, and then is kind of giving a solution as well. So here Prabhupada is like explaining extensively how like the Pandavas have like this good situation, so that the materially, like, they were very they had a very good situation, in the sense that they were very great warriors, and even spiritually, Prabhupada is saying that you know, the king himself, he says, it was the symbol of religion. And so, like, is listing all these very good assets that the Pandavas had. And this is interesting because it seems like it's just to emphasize how, like, even if they were like so nicely situated, still they had to suffer so many challenges. So it's interesting to notice how miseries will come anyway in this world, like even to the best of people, because mainly for kind of two reasons, because it's the nature of the world. Like Krishna is defining this world in Bhagavad Gita in the 8th chapter as Dukalayam Ashashvatam, which means temporary and full of misery. So it's the nature of this world to be, full of misery. That's we cannot change. And another reason is that sometimes it's the plan of the Lord. So that's, it's inevitable. We cannot do anything about it if it's the plan of the Lord to give some devotees like some challenges. They had to go through that. But then Prabhupada in the purport, like there is last sentence of the purport, which is I think it's very, very inspiring, and it's so amazing that I think like can even just that sentence, to go deeper into that sentence would require like a class in itself. And Prabhupada is saying, there is nothing to be lamented when a matter is beyond the control of any human being. So this is a wonderful point that is like all over the scriptures. We find again and again this point. And there is a very nice verse actually in Srimad Bhagavatam in the 10th canto. It goes like this: Tatenukampam susamikshamano Punjana evatma kritam vipakam Ritva papurbe vidatan namaste Jivetayo muktipade sadayapa. And the translation is, my dear Lord, one who earnestly waits for you to bestow your causeless mercy upon him, all the while patiently suffering the reactions of his past misdeeds and offering you respectful obeisances with his heart, words, and body, is surely eligible for liberation, for it has become his right. This is a very famous verse about how if we patiently tolerate whatever challenging situations we have, and if we have strong, full faith in Krishna, that he's there to in all these situations, in good situation, in bad situation, he's always there, and we are just tolerating, then surely, it says here, surely is eligible for liberation. So surely we'll get back to the spiritual world just by having faith to carry on whatever the situation may be. And also another point on this, like that Prabhupada is saying here, that there is nothing to be lamented, that we find also this point of there is no need for lamentation. We find this like throughout Bhagavad Gita in so many verses. We find this idea of not lamenting, and like for example in the 2nd chapter when Krishna says tasmada pariharyate natvam shochitumarasi, in the unavoidable discharge of your duty you should not lament. That's again this point that if we there is no reason to lament over something that we cannot change. is over something that we cannot avoid. So, and like you can see the similarity between Arjun and Yudhishthir here, that like Arjun was lamenting because he was in a difficult situation, because he didn't want to fight the war against his own relatives and friends on the other side of the army. And Yudhishthir also here is lamenting because like all these people were killed and he felt responsible for that. So so in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is saying that if you're doing your duty, then there is no reason to lament, because you cannot avoid doing your duty. So it's better, you know, we have a limited amount of energy, so it's better to use our energy, you know, to try to control the mind than trying to avoid our duties that we cannot actually avoid, and in the end we have to do our duty anyway. So it's just a waste of energy to just trying to avoid the unavoidable. But it's the nature of the mind to try to avoid unpleasant things, and it's like for me, I find sometimes, you know, like when the mind is coming up with so many excuses, like whenever I don't want to go on book distribution, I find that my mind is coming up with all the creative excuses not to go, like you know, some very not don't even make sense, but some of them are quite logical and they seem like they make sense. You know, like you can say, well, the weather is not good, or you know, like maybe today is not the good day, maybe I can, you know, use my time in a better way. Or sometimes even, you know, oh, I have a better service, maybe this service will, you know, be better. But actually we can see that when the mind is coming up with all these things, we can see that actually it's just the mind. And there is a very nice verse that I feel is very inspiring in this connection. And it's at the end of the 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita. And Krishna is saying that, thus knowing oneself to be transcendental to the material senses, mind, and intelligence, O mighty Arjun, one should steady the mind by deliberate spiritual intelligence, Krishna consciousness, and thus, by spiritual strength, conquer this insatiable enemy known as lust. So here Krishna is saying how to overcome this propensity to, you know, just looking for enjoyment or just looking for pleasurable things. And that we are actually more powerful than the senses, the mind, and the intelligence. We are above them. So we can actually, by Krishna's mercy, we can train the mind to, by connecting, by following the process of Krishna consciousness, we can have this spiritual strength that Krishna is mentioning here in this verse, and in that way we can overcome all this like useless waste of energy of the mind trying to avoid unavoidable things. So again, like this idea that nothing, there is nothing to be lamented when a matter is beyond the control of any human being, is something that we find in so many verses, and it's something that everyone can relate to. Like, for example, like I many times when I'm on book distribution, I quote verse 2:14 of Bhagavad Gita, that like happiness and distress, they come like the changing of the seasons, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. That is something that's, you know, is everyone can relate to that, that, we cannot complain for, for heat in the summer or for cold in the winter, because there is no point. You cannot change. You cannot change the seasons. And in the same way, you cannot change the challenging situations that they are beyond yourself. And it's interesting how everyone can understand it, but still, when it comes to practical matters, everyone is still getting frustrated, and when we don't get what we want. So seems like there is a gap between knowledge, between what we know and what we actually apply. And there was a lecture by Devamrita Maharaj. He was saying that most people know that actually after we cover the basic needs, that whatever we need in life, after that, any more, if we are richer than that, if we have more money than that, actually doesn't make us happy. So everyone agree on that. Everyone agree that, like whenever you have your basic needs covered, you don't need anything else. And whatever you have, any extra comforts you have, it actually doesn't make you happier. But then when he asked, okay, so how many people are willing to renounce everything else after you have the basic needs? How many people are willing to live on that standard, to, like get rid of all the extra comforts and then just having your basic needs? And what is interesting is that nobody raised their hands. So it was interesting that there is this huge gap from what we know and what we apply. And I think it's an interesting meditation for us as well as devotees, that we know so much from the scriptures, or at least we know something, like we are reading Bhagavad Gita, we read Srimad Bhagavatam, and there is so much philosophy, so much knowledge from Srila Prabhupada and from all the acharyas, but how much are we applying in our life? That I think is a very nice meditation to kind of improve our practice. So it's interesting, like this is the first two verses. It's interesting how that they kind of have this, seems to have kind of this structure of like presenting like a challenging situation, like in the first verse we read, that Srila Prabhupada is saying that even pious people have to suffer challenging situations in material life, and then it's giving a solution, mentioning of these three guiding principles of following the Brahmanas and the Vaishnavas, have faith in God and follow religious principles. And then in the next verse also same structure is given, that like this presenting of this problem, that even strong warriors, even most well situated people has to suffer. And then in this last sentence that we just went through, that is kind of giving the solution that that there is nothing to lament for things that we cannot control. And then the last verse, it seems to me that it kind of giving a conclusion. The verse itself is kind of concluding this discussion, saying that no one can actually know the plan of the Lord. And here Prabhupada in this purport is giving a very, very inspiring point that I think it's very interesting to meditate on, that the best policy is to follow the order of the best policy is simply to abide by the orders of the Lord without argument. So is quite strong, but it's actually quite simple way to see Krishna consciousness process. And the same kind of same process is explained in Bhagavad Gita in the very famous verse in chapter 4. Tat vidhi pratipadena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshanti te jnanam jnaninas tattvadarshinaha. That Krishna is saying just in, okay, I remember the Sanskrit, I don't remember the English. Just inquire, 34. Just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master. Inquire from him submissively and render service unto him. The self-realized souls can impart knowledge unto you because they have seen the truth. So, like here also, like it's connecting to the same principles of very, very simple process of Krishna consciousness to just ask, like Arjuna is doing in Bhagavad Gita, to just ask to get the instructions and to follow the instructions. So that's what Arjuna is doing here, to just like, okay, at the beginning he's confused, then he's asked to Krishna, like, what should I do? And then Krishna gives instructions in Bhagavad Gita, and he just follows the instructions. So it's very, very simple. And Prabhupada is making the same point in this purport, that the best policy is just follow the orders without argument. You just follow it, and having faith of the spiritual master is giving the instructions. And then I think it's a very nice meditation that, like, sometimes many people, like, for when they are faced with like making a decision, some people go through, you know, all this list of pro and cons, or, you know, like what is best, or what is, you know, giving the best outcome, maybe whatever consequence we may get from doing this. And they go on all with this old mental speculation, and they never come to a conclusion, actually, because you never know whatever is going to happen. But here Prabhupada is saying that if we just follow the instructions with faith, then there is no need for mental speculation. Without argument, he says, like, like it's so simple that we don't actually need to speculate and to waste our precious energy on all that kind of what is good or what is bad. And I think as devotees, like, we can apply also for service sometimes. You know, sometimes we decide, like, we are have to make decisions on what service shall we do, and if that decision is only based on whatever is pleasurable, whatever just on whatever we like doing, I'm not saying that, you know, we shouldn't consider that at all, but if it's the decision is just based on that, it's difficult to carry on the service, because at some point it will come the challenge and the service won't be so much pleasurable anymore. And then, like, if we just base our decision to serve in that way just because it gave us pleasure, then we won't be able to carry on. So in that way, you can also apply to service, that if we do a service just for following the instructions of the spiritual master, then we can carry on even through difficult times, because we can always rely on the fact that we are doing that as a service, we are doing that as a like that we are just following the instructions, and then we can carry on having faith in the instructions. So last point here, that okay, I'm looking at the time. Prabhu, sorry, is class until 8:45? Yes.
Yes, Mataji. Yes.
Okay, then we can conclude here. So, like, just quickly mention that last point here in the purport that Prabhupada is making, that like here in this particular situation, the Krishna's plan was to show everyone that virtue always win against evil. So it's like Bhishma, even if he was a very great devotee, and we can see from this prayer in this chapter how great devotee he was, but still he was like on the opposite side of Krishna. And Krishna is by this this situation is showing how even a great warrior as Bhishma still, like, he had to lose the battle because he was on the opposite of Krishna, and it was like against the side of virtue and religious principles. So thank you very much, and we can open up maybe like if you have some comments or questions or corrections, and please excuse me if I made any mistakes or any imprecisions. Hare Krishna. Okay, we have a couple of comments here. Prajuma Prabhu is saying, great point about not waiting for a perfect moment for our Krishna consciousness. This moment is our perfect moment. Thank you. Wow, that's a very good point. Yeah, that's this moment is our perfect moment. Yeah, that we have to make the perfect moment, otherwise it will never come. So thank you, Prabhu, for bring it up. That's and Madan Priya Mataji saying, Hare Krishna Braja Devi Mataji, thank you for such a wonderful class, very inspiring as always. You touch upon an experience during book distribution where a gentleman refused to take a book at the end of your conversation with him. How best, in your experience, can we deal with rejection? And what can we learn from it and move forward? Also, I really liked your point on moving service. Hare Krishna Mataji, very nice question, very nice points. Thank you. So, how can we deal with rejection? I think it's something like the gym, you know, like when we go to the gym, we like exercise our muscles, and that's the same on book distribution. Like if you just go once, you know, we find it challenging, but the more we do the service, the more we kind of getting stronger and stronger in the service. And also, like, the more we show Krishna that we have the desire to do that service, it gives the detachment necessary to overcome, you know, like whatever rejection we get, because like this idea of developing detachment is something that we find in all, you know, like in Bhagavad Gita, in Srimad Bhagavatam, that is a very important principle of spiritual life, to develop detachment. So I feel like book distribution is a very wonderful opportunity to develop this detachment, because we never get what we want in book distribution. It's always like sometimes we get much more than we want. Sometimes we don't get anything we want, but that's we learn in this service to go with Krishna's will, and I feel like it's a very intimate service. Like, for example, when we do deity service, you know, you are direct in contact with Krishna's form, in the form of the deity, and that's the same with book distribution. We are in contact like with the mind of Krishna. You can feel like when you speak to people, how like it's Krishna speaking through them. So I feel like it's a very, very special service that you get like this connection. That it can be challenging, it's sometimes, but if we go through these challenges, if we like tolerate the challenges, there is a very great reward, is that like we can have this connection. We can have this connection just by making the effort. And that's in this case, like I was like really thinking, you know, like I'm here and I'm trying to do the service, but I'm actually just holding the books. Like this guy has just distributed the Bhagavad Gita to this lady. I'm just like holding the books, you know. So it's Krishna every time is teaching something during book distribution. So to reply to your question, what can we learn from it? Like every rejection, you actually every rejection, every time we're trying to offer this service, we learn so many things, because that's also because sometimes it's very challenging. So it's Krishna sees the effort, it doesn't see the offering, you know. He's self-satisfied, it doesn't need anything, but he sees the effort, that we are trying to do something for his pleasure. Any other questions? So I hope it answers your questions. Thank you. Any other comments? Thank you. Another comments, like your point about accepting Krishna's will. In this life, we don't always know if we are on the right side. Yeah, that's why we need a spiritual master. And it says in the scripture that we need the guidance of Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. So in that way, we can always see if we are on the right side. And that if we follow the principles that are explained in Bhagavad Gita, if we live according to that, and if we follow the teachings that our spiritual master is giving, and or the Vaishnavas or the devotees are helping us in our spiritual practice, if we follow that, then we know that we are on the right path. Because otherwise, like, we always get distracted by the mind, always, you know, mind is always like trying to find different ways and different paths, not always in line with the spiritual practice. So thank you very much. Is there any other comments or questions? If you want, you can unmute yourself.
Thank you for a wonderful class, Mataji. Really, really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Babu.
Thank you, Devi Mataji. It was very nice class as usual. And thank you for accepting our invitation to guide us on these verses. very powerful verses. We look forward for more classes from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you so much for the service. It's very purifying. So, thank you.
Our Grace Braja Devi Mataji ki jai.
Gaur Bhakta-vrinda ki jai.
Hare Krishna Mataji, thank you for a wonderful class.
Thank you, Mataji. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Hare Gaur.
Thank you, Mataji, for a wonderful class.